Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drumm McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at changinghighered.com. And now, here's your host, Drumm McNaughton.
Thank you, David. My guest today is Dr. Karen Panetta. Karen's an electrical and computer engineer, she's an inventor, and she also happens to be the Dean of Graduate Education for the School of Engineering at Tufts University. She's a fellow at IEEE, NASA JOVE, and AAIA. Her research spans AI, machine learning, automated systems, visual sensing. In short, she's a Renaissance woman who can really talk about AI in a way that people can understand it, especially if you're not a geek. She received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Math, and Engineering Mentoring from President Barack Obama, and she joins me today to talk about AI, education, and how we need to teach and use AI in our schools today. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Thank you. I am excited to have a good conversation with you. When we were talking a few days ago, you really struck me as a Renaissance woman, doing so many different things. Please tell the listeners a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, first of all, a lot of people call me a pioneer, but sometimes I like to think of myself more as a warrior because I'm, treading waters that no one's ever looked at before. So I am a distinguished professor and dean at Tufts University, but I came from industry. I am the co-inventor of the first digital twin, and I have been working with simulation and imaging processing. And when I came to Tufts, I was the first woman, as a professor there in engineering. So that was a kind of a different experience. But I am now in AI, artificial intelligence. And what I do is I like to say, I build AI engines and I put them into different vehicles, whether it's dental for health or medicine, even conservation for animals, as well as traffic management. And I'm even doing it underwater.
Okay, I'm not sure I want to go there.
Ocean conservation is absolutely, we're looking at our oceans, mapping our oceans, understanding what's there. I mean, it's really exciting. And I think it's our new frontier, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. My experience on oceans was flying over the top of them when I was in the Navy. Hopefully we didn't get into any of them. But you've also done a lot of work. You've been recognized by IEEE, other things. That's an amazing career.
Well,
for anybody.
Yeah, IEEE has really been a partner in my entire career journey because you have to remember, when I came from industry into academia, that's a very unusual switch. So IEEE is the world's largest organization for technical professionals. And we have 500,000 members around the world, which means when I want to do a project on autism in children in India, I've got thousands of helpers over there ready to jump on board. And that's exactly some of the projects that we've done. So I tracked autism in young girls in India. I've worked with zoos in African countries. I've done power for orphanages in Malawi and other third world countries to help bring electricity and health and fresh water. So, not typically the things you see with electrical engineers, but I think that that's what we're really trying to promote is just how interdisciplinary it is to be an engineer and understanding how you can make huge impact to other people's problems.
And because knowledge is becoming so specialized, it requires a team to work on some of these complex problems we have.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that's the first lesson I try to teach my engineers is you think because you're an engineer, you already know all the solutions for everybody's problems. While we know technology, you really have to understand who or what the client that you're serving and the populations. We've seen places when we've brought in really cool technology. Well, if it's super expensive, can't be maintained, or it's intimidating, they won't use it no matter how useful it is. So to leave a long-lasting impact it has to be conducive to the people that you want to use it. And it also has to be low cost, because if you go implement something that is worth more if they steal it and take it apart and sell the parts, you've defeated the entire project.
Exactly. And so, speaking of interdisciplinary, Tufts is an incredible institution. My uncle actually graduated from Tufts many years ago as a chemical engineer. Tell me a little bit about Tufts and how this interdisciplinary work works, especially with AI.
Oh, sure. Well, your uncle must be filthy rich now, because Tufts graduates really do very well, become very prominent leaders in industry, even if they don't stay in engineering. So that's part of the recipe and hallmark of Tufts is right now, it's not just about the technology skills, but the well-roundedness, the liberal arts. We have a lot of students that study multiple disciplines, but the beautiful thing that I really like about Tufts is the way I can integrate with the dental school, the vet school, school of nutrition, medical school. It doesn't matter if I'm an engineer, I can pick up the phone Zoom with anybody to have meetings and bounce ideas off of people. I once received a phone call saying, we want you to work with elephants. And I was like, I love elephants. It's the Tufts mascot, but what's that got to do with electrical engineering? And that was conservation. So I owned the first drone on the campus. I learned how to work with drones from my IEEE colleagues in Robotics and Automation Society. And I started an animal conservation project that now is recognized for being able to detect and recognize animals and helping vets with diagnosing their health remotely so that they don't have to anesthetize them or get squished or anything else.
And you use AI with all this, correct?
Now I do. Back then, we didn't have the computational power that we did now. So if you think back to my days when I was doing the digital twin, I had one CPU and I was doing millions of experiments on time-shared computers. Today, because of the power of computing, we can do billions of experiments. And we're looking at is all these different scenarios to expedite solutions or try out new ideas. And the AI now helps us with detection and recognition. It's also helping us find new solutions from medicines, as well as analyzing data that was just too cumbersome for us to do. But I think I have found it really helpful for, again, with my digital twin background, to help us emulate physical experiments that before used to take lots of time, money, and resources. And now we can model it and put it right into AI, and it can give us some really tangible outputs.
Help me out, because this is one of those curious things that I've had. My understanding of AI is it does tremendous research. It can look into nooks and crannies that many humans don't know to give solutions. But does it think for itself and take you to that next step that's needed for innovation? Can it do that?
So this is part of I would call it the myth. People right now are, they think it's this magic black box that, you ask it a question, it comes out and gives you the answer. And really what we have to understand is the data that you feed it, or what I call the ground truth, is meaning known data with known outputs of what the responses should be. You have to have that at the foundation. If you don't, and you're just scraping the web and getting data from anywhere, you're going to garbage in equals garbage out. So what I've been trying to push is that people have to understand that AI is not this magic box. It really requires significant knowledge of your data and in the context of the data. Because I can put in data, have it give me something that mathematically looks, all right, that makes sense. But for the situation, it might not make any sense. And that's why you still need experts and humans in the loop, that I would say. So we're not there yet, but it's being portrayed that way, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. And that's a critical piece that you mentioned as far as where we are with AI is there's a lot of benefits to it, but it requires the human in the loop, especially when it comes to ethics. And we're going to get into ethics in a little bit.
Yes, I think that one of the, promotions that I've been trying to do, and my colleagues and I at IEEE, is we understand that part of our job is, the public imperative to help explain technology to everyone, not just other nerds like me. You have to really be able to talk to children. And that starts from birth. People always think, oh, you have to wait. No, we're in a renaissance right now, similar to when we first had the internet come out and we had all the cyber phishing and things like that. And now with deep fakes and all those other types of high-end AI that can help manipulate and convince people of, I would say, that something that really isn't. You could hear the voice of someone that you love and it might sound legitimate. So, we're really trying to train young people as well as the entire public that there's cautions. You have to proceed with caution, just like you did when the internet first came out. And even when the telephones, right? Remember your telephone used to come up and have caller ID, and it was, you were late on something, the police were coming to get you. It looked legitimate, but now we're like, yeah, that's spam. Well, we haven't got that same level of awareness in our public yet. And that's, I think, the first challenge that we're trying to overcome. The second thing is just like, when the internet came out, the laws, the rules, the safety, the guidelines, tremendous lag behind it. So, and we're seeing that now. You can't create the laws fast enough to compensate for what's going on. And then finally, you think about how much work there is to catch up. So for everything we're doing, there's always somebody behind you trying to, undo it. So you always have to keep up with the bad actors as well. So, we're going to be getting our steps in, trying to keep up with this.
Our digital steps.
There we go, our digital steps.
Yeah. So it's interesting because there are all sorts of ethical things that the mainstream media is just now starting to come out. They've been glossed over. For example, a newcomer to AI, there's 3 things that they really need to know, isn't there?
Yes. They need to know, one, where did the data come from? Was it ethically sourced? And, and am I going to be able to, if I use this data, is it going to actually harm somebody's reputation, or is it going to make an impact on someone's career? So, and you have to also be able to know when you see a result of AI, you also have to ask, well, how many test cases was this, and where was this data sourced from? So if we're trying to do, nutrition in a third world country and comparing them to Boston, Massachusetts, that's not even going to apply. So you have to understand that. And data ages out, right? So, if we're trying to look at data sets of people from World War II where everybody smoked versus today where everybody's on the treadmill and everybody's trying to be healthy, it doesn't make sense. But I want to bring up a point about just ethically sourcing, because people don't even know what that means. If you see a picture, and think about this all the time, I look at websites and you see all these ads for, weight loss and others like that, and they show you somebody's backside, and I ask that question, I'm like, does that person give permission to have their picture, even though you're not showing their face? Is it really okay to do that? And if it was my backside, I would know it, and I would not want it out in the like that. So that's an example of, is it ethically sourced? And even now I see a lot of things like showing the elderly and saying, ads for different types of medications and things. And I'm like, did they really take a picture of somebody in a hospital? Or is it digitally generated? So there should be some sort of declaration that this is, artificially generated, but we don't have that kind of stamp of approval or, grade A, AI.
Yeah. It strikes me as very similar to those people who get all their news from social media instead of reputable news sources. And I'll, mention NPR as being one of those. They report on both sides of the issue. Social media, because of their algorithms, they continue to feed you information that they think you like based on your previous clicks. Is that really the truth?
Right. I think a lot, right now what we see a lot in the news is headlines that are meant to grab you and suck you in. And they're going to feed you more of what they think you want to see. So sometimes when we're doing research, we've been doing some research and all of a sudden I'm getting these websites coming up and I'm like, how did I get myself involved in this? And it was because I was doing research on that area for some reason. And then I get, and I was like, I don't want to see this. This is not what I wanted to see.
Yeah.
But you have to think about those key questions is, where is this data coming from? Because we have seen where millions of bots can influence and, say that this poll says this. It can influence those things. And if we can't track it back and make it explainable, then, it's not real. So right now it's a huge challenge because if millions of people think it's true, then guess what? We're rewriting history and AI is going to say it's true. And, I always give this analogy in my talks. I always say, if I were to ask, is Dracula have an aversion to garlic? People would say yes. Does that mean Dracula's real? Does that so we could rewrite history, and we can also see that it could actually hurt people. And I think we've seen some of the deep fakes that have actually hurt celebrities, but they have the bank account to, track these perpetrators down and get it removed. You and I, they put it up there, we're dead. We got nothing.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. And one of the things that you and I have talked about before is real research is IRB, Institutional Research Board approved.
Yes.
Every research higher ed institution.
Do no harm. That's right. Do no harm.
Do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
Most IRBs focus on interaction with humans, but it goes beyond that, especially with you, the research that you've done on elephants.
Yes. Well,
that was an interesting example.
Because if I'm tracking for park rangers the health of elephants, and I'm looking at their roaming and where they are in their health, if I don't put a layer of really good, robust security around that, well, then the bad actors can come in and find the elephants. And by the time you get there, it's too late. So that's why it's essential that for everything we do, every good kind thing that we try to do with technology, we have to also now think differently than when I was in school, we'll just get it to work, to how is somebody going to misuse this? And that's a whole career in itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so how is the data collected is incredibly important, but equally important to a researcher is how is this data validated?
That's true. That's true. And having it validated by experts is really essential. And I can give you an example. I was doing a health application trying to look at a cancer. And we asked 6 different doctors, the cancer. And they were very good saying cancer, not cancer. But then when we asked them to grade it, it was all over the place. So as somebody who's going to use this as a ground truth, I'm like, well, how do I use this as a ground truth if the experts don't agree? So that's an example of, you really have to have robust metrics to be able to say what is the ground truth in the beginning. That's why I love IEEE, because they're trying to come up with standards. You mentioned looking at both sides. IEEE is looking only at the public good and the benefit to humanity. So they're looking at the technology and the standards to say, okay, what are uniform standards that anybody can apply for AI, for data? And that's why I think the organization's famous for its standards, because it does that. And it's not, that some company paid them to do it. It's like, no, we look across, we take all perspectives, and we're going to make sure that whatever we give out to the public is in your best interest and is fair and can actually be utilized so that we have a common language.
Mm-hmm. So of the 3 things for newcomers, we've talked on, data, how's data collected, how's it validated, but I would say probably the most important one is something we touched on earlier, having a human at the end that makes the decision.
Yes. So, how many times have we seen people's evaluations? You didn't get the promotion. Why? Well, the AI said it. I always give the same story that, while it wasn't AI, when I was in school, I was getting straight A's in math and science. And yet when my friend who scored lower than me got, math and science scores lower, the job assessment said he could be an engineer or a politician, and mine said I could sell makeup or be a cook. And I was just like, where did this come from? And I was really fortunate that my dad was like, where did this come from? Because my daughter can't cook, and that's something I still can't do. But it just showed there was bias, and we haven't really talked about what bias is. But when you have humans putting in the rules, then guess what? The AI is going to perpetuate those biases.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And even the humans have biases. We all know this. But when you've got a human programming AI, it's going to build in a bias, a basic bias right off the bat, is it not?
It is. Because, I'll give you, for instance, if we were going to say, I'm at a school, I'm the graduate dean, and we're looking at applications. Well, the way I look at applications, I don't care where the student comes from. I don't care where their institution that they were before. But some faculty might say, if I'm going to write this, I want them to come from a brand name institution that I've heard of. Their grades have to be this way. Their experience they have to have published, where I'm looking more for the projects, I'm looking more for the volunteer engagement, I'm looking more for how they learn. I have a very different perspective. So if you've got that type of evaluation where somebody's just looking at, I only want this subset of schools, I want this. Well, guess what? You're only going to get applicants that to pass or get the higher recommendations. And we've seen that in jobs. And that's unfortunate because what happens is we exclude people that could be wonderful contributors. But even worse is like when you go up for a promotion and it says, the AI says you're not ready. You're like, what? Give it to me. Tell me why. No, it's just the AI. So it's the same thing like when I was in high school. Nobody could tell me why I had to be a cook or sell makeup, other than I knew that it was because somewhere in there was like, if girl, then, exclude engineering.
Oh, I understand. When I did those, I got out of the Navy and did some of those. They said I should be a forest ranger. And it's like, seriously?
You've gone from water,
backpack,
you've gone from ocean to forest. Okay.
Exactly. So AI is in many respects changing the face of education. We need to be teaching AI early. I think about it from the generational perspective. We got millennials. We've got Gen Z. Gen Z has been with technology. I mean, they were born with a smartphone in their hand, weren't they?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes. But now we've got Gen A, which are the youngest coming out. They're an AI generation. That's scary in some ways.
It is because, there's the question now, if educators are now faced with this, do I really need to teach them the foundational basics? Because now AI they can just ask AI to get it. So, one of the things I've been promoting is it doesn't matter what field you're in. Just like we all use computers today and word processors, doesn't matter the discipline. So everybody's going to have to know how to utilize AI. But it doesn't mean you have to know how to program up the deep, neural network to do it. But it does mean you need to be able to use it with caution, know how to use it intelligently, even how to prompt and what we call prompt engineering. The way you ask the question, can get a different answer, or it can lead you to, things that you don't expect. And so this is one of the things that we're trying to utilize it in schools to say, don't try to avoid it. And I use the parallel that when drones came out, everybody's like, nope, drones, nobody should use drones. I know it's going to be used for evil. And yes, it is. But at the same time, they've also had profound good uses as well. So we've been trying to say, when they're going to use it and we want them to use it, we want them to learn how to use it responsibly. Mm-hmm. And so, and declare it. And we also want them to understand that what is really your voice? What is authentic you? So, and that's where I think we're worried, is because everybody's going to sound the same. We're all going to be, averaged into what AI thinks is the norm. And communication will be different too.
Oh, totally. So with this, let's dig further into the education piece. You're the dean at the College of Engineering there at the School of Engineering.
The graduate dean.
Yeah. How is AI changing how Tufts School of Engineering? How's it changing the teaching?
Yeah, so we're using it, again, for experimentation, helping us to explore and learn new concepts. I think being able to do, most of, I will say, research-oriented institutions, the first thing we do is, go do a literature search, find out what the latest and greatest is out there. And, the days are long gone where you go sit in a library or, you search up something and then now you have to read all the papers. Now it summarizes it for you. So the question is the takeaway, what you're getting in the summaries of all this research, enough for you to understand the fundamentals, for you to advance and make and innovate? So that leap is really what we're focusing on is, okay, you can use it to help get you information quickly and maybe do some preliminary analysis. But to get to the next level, you need a unique contribution. And you can't just say, hey, AI, give me a unique contribution or research area. And I've seen people do it. It'll come back and give you some suggestions, but I'm also wondering, how many other billions of people have you given that same suggestion to? And again, we know for entrepreneurship, it's not just about the good technology. It's got to have a great business case, right? It's got to have a market space. So being really good, everybody just being really good at technology doesn't mean that something's going to lead to an impactful innovation. It just means you might have another widget or toy that, is a hot thing now, but doesn't have any longevity and doesn't leave lasting impact. So we're looking at that as well. But we're really engaging our arts and sciences people, because somebody who teaches English or history could be panicking, like, oh my gosh, they're going to replace me. And it's not about that. It's more about, okay, well, what are the questions we're not asking? Because everybody's just jumping on the AI bandwagon. What are we not asking that we should be? We need that population. We need those non-technical disciplines to chime in and say, this is where AI fails. This is where you're losing creativity, so that we can be aware of it and be able to build in what I would say more smart hooks to protect us and also give us more explainability.
You brought up a point earlier about the ethical uses of AI. We're still trying to figure all of that out. But at the same time, we've got to be able to make choices with how we use it. And you also said something that really struck me. There's got to be a foundational knowledge. When I think about Bloom's taxonomy, and of course, educators, we all know about Bloom's if we've done any course development, et cetera, you can find out knowledge and comprehension. Those are, I don't want to call them irrelevant nowadays, but in many respects with AI, it's not the knowledge that's critical. You've got to have foundational to be able to do critical thinking, to be able to do that analysis, that next level to say, this makes sense. No, that one's out to lunch. I'm not even going to consider it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I like to say we're in the age, what I call back to the future technologies. And, and I call it that because if you think of some of the innovations, like we weren't able to implement years ago because we didn't have the computational power or the experimentation power to do it. Now, stuff that was theoretical, we have new materials and computing and, that are nanomaterials and all these other things that allow us to realize theories that before were just, unreachable, unrealizable. So that's a real leap, but you can't make that leap unless you understand that fundamental theory, right? And that's why you have to know why it fails too. I think that one of the things, Drumm, that you've been talking about besides the ethical considerations is understanding failure. And that's something that we want and stress in all our engineering programs, but we stress it across the whole learning environment is we want you to fail now early and often, because when you get out there, we want to let you know how to deal with it so that you can get back up on your feet. And I do a lot of outreach. I told you I start with them when they're really young. I don't, it doesn't matter, from birth. And one of the first things that I see in all these fields is people are intimidated by it. And they say, I say, they just want to quit. Engineering is not for me, or STEM is not for me. And I say, if you join a sports team and you lose the game, do you quit the sport? No, right? You train harder. You try differently. You think strategically differently. And engineering is our sport. And that's what we need to do is we got to get our teammates, all different levels of teammates to come together to understand that, yes, we've got to learn this. But if you're afraid of it and you're afraid it's going to fail, then you're going to be left behind. And that's not a good thing. And it's not good for the economy. It's not good for communities. And it's certainly not good for children who are going to essentially need and live and breathe AI in the future.
I can remember my mother tutoring the next door neighbor. She had a block on math. And my mother, my grandmother on my mother's side was a math teacher. So obviously my mother understood how to do math. And trying to train her to get her past the block, we've got folks in technology the same way. My wife asked me frequently, can you help me with this? I know you showed me before, but it's like, sure, why, it's a matter of teaching people, not giving them a fish, but teaching them how to fish.
Yes.
That type of thing.
It is. And you can't throw it at them all at once. You've got to, incrementally.
That's my problem.
Yeah, no. And I always start out, even with my outreach, when parents are saying, how do I get my kids involved in math and science, or not math and science, but in engineering? And I'll say, well, what do they like? And they say, well, they do like math and science. I say, oh, really? So they're doing math and science in their free time? And the answer is no, they like dancing. They like, this, they like sports. And that's the connection you need to make, is how can you use this in a field you love? Like, think about dancing and human dynamics. I mean, think of the choreographic, masterpieces that AI could actually help someone who understands how a body moves to do that. And so that's why I love it. Music, I think, is struggling because you see so many people, and AI actors, voiceover actors, is huge controversy over, you're replacing them with AI. But you got to remember that AI was trained with somebody's real voice. So you might be in there, and they might have your voice in there, but you're not getting credit for it because they don't have to prove that the AI used you during training.
And the challenge becomes, who owns this data?
Yes,
From an
yes.
intellectual property perspective, that's a major issue right now.
It is, and it's actually an asset for some of the things I'm doing on right now. I have data sets that I've created, the first in the world. Some of them I share. Some of the databases I've shared are for facial recognition to prevent human trafficking. I've put out in the general public because I want everybody to be able to utilize that. But I also have a dental database for training new dentists. But there's other things that I don't want out there because they could be used for harmful purposes. So understanding, what to share, what not to share, and giving access is really important. And I think that that's the other problem too, is a lot of corporations don't want to share. And that's why IEEE comes into play, because it's like, if we all shared and we all conquered this problem together with AI, then we could make it more explainable. We could make it safer. And we could put in these hooks that I'm talking about to be able to, be able to see what's going on, or actually open its brain and see, a snapshot of where it got its ideas from.
And I think that's incredibly important. What I've heard a lot of institutions doing is they're having their own AI database. They contract with an institute or a company and say, okay, this is fine. We want to keep it there. These type of restrictive models. This is a way to be able to protect people's data, is it not?
It is. And that's why, for instance, at certain institutions, you're not allowed to use a certain large language model, because they know that if I'm giving you my research data and I'm putting it out there on that large language model, that they're collecting my data, and then they can go feed that to whatever research or whatever organization they want. So there's also, protections in there that say a lot of organizations, sometimes we build it in-house because we want to know that the models we've built aren't going out sharing it with other companies or other countries that, that don't have the same sharing policies or that won't protect the data. And we also thinking about, especially again, if we got people in there and we've got human data in there, we definitely don't want that going out. That's going to be the most protected class.
So with that, if you had advice to give to an institution about using data, using AI, what would that be?
Don't believe anything that says it has 100% accuracy. When somebody tells you, especially when somebody's trying to give you a new product or that's going to expedite all your processes, ask about, how many test cases was this tested on? What population, what of cases, what kind of people, what kind of scenarios? And they should be able to provide you those numbers, because the people get hung up and saying, accuracy. Oh, look at the accuracy of this and precision. And that's not telling the whole story. And I think that that's sort of like, you get the sticker price or something at the top, and then you find out, you read the small print. So that's a big one. The second one is, don't believe everything you see. Just because AI says it and just because it becomes in a headline, you've got to start thinking, and it's unfortunate, we've got to start thinking of taking everything with a grain of salt of, okay, this is a headline, but where's the data substantiated? And you might say, well, they showed a video with it. They showed a real video, and now we have to even question, was it real? So,
Exactly.
So that's become a big problem. So just be cautious, and especially when you get anything that is asking you for private information or something, it's just like the phone call. I still hang up, and I delete, and I figure, you know what, if worse comes to worse and I deleted something that was real, they'll figure out a way to get to me anyway, feel legitimately. So,
Exactly.
protect yourself and protect your children. I think that online now, it's even more, it's more critical now than ever that we protect our youth, because they are in electronics and we can't possibly monitor everything that they're being exposed to.
Yeah, those are great advice for people. This has been just fascinating for me, Karen. I am a geek at heart. What can I say?
We're going to recruit you then. You should come back and see some of the cool stuff I'm working on.
I would love to.
My technology toys.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I wouldn't fit in nerd girls. I'd fit in just nerds, period.
Oh, I have nerd boys. We also have nerd boys. So
okay. There we go.
You got to remember, Nerd Girls was a program really talking about empowering students to make impact in humanity using their skills collectively. And the outcomes of that have changed curriculums for both boys and girls. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So as we wrap up, as we always do, our 2 takeaway questions. 3 takeaways for university presidents and boards. What do they need to know about AI and to make it usable and safe?
Don't be afraid of it. Teach your students responsible and dive right in, making sure that everybody, not just your engineers, are using it and learning it and understanding how to use it ethically. And have those discussions. And we haven't figured it out. They might actually figure it out. The other thing is making sure that your processes internally, even your selection processes, don't utilize AI outputs to determine the future of your faculty's careers or your students that you admit.
Thank you. Those are great things. The human in the loop. You got to do it. What's next for you?
I'm going to be working on some overhauling strategies for education. I work with governments to help them look at strategies for education to make sure that they can engage all their populations. And right now at IEEE, I'm working on an initiative to make sure that we can provide accessibility and education, the best educational products to anyone who wants to learn technology so that we can serve all communities, whether you're a beginner, advanced, or whether you're a super neat geek like me.
Well, that's great. And when you get down that path, if you need some help, feel free to give me a shout.
I will. Thank you for having me, Drumm.
Karen, thank you. I've enjoyed our conversation. I look forward to hearing more about it in, a few months.
Oh, you will. You will. I promise. It's not going away.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye now.
Thanks for listening today, and a special thank you to my guest, Dr. Karen Panetta. Karen, thanks for a wonderful conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed hearing more about what you're doing, especially in how you're applying AI to multiple programs and areas, and I look forward to the next time our paths cross. To my listeners, thanks again for tuning in. See you next week.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drumm McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.